compelled you to silence by standing here. Are we good to go? 1 minute? Okay. Yvonne, are we good to go? Is he like Oz? Can you speak to us? All right, I guess I'm antsy. Okay. Well, welcome everyone, and we have others joining us online. Thanks to everyone for coming tonight to this EOU English Writing and MFA in Creative Writing event, which is put on with the help of student fees, for which we're grateful. I'm happy to be introducing Georgia Cloepfil, who will be reading from her fabulous memoir about soccer, The Striker and the Clock. And then she'll be in conversation with me for a bit about the book before she fields your questions. So make sure you are thinking about what you want to ask her as you're listening to her. We have books for sale, thanks to the EOU bookstore over on this side for afterwards. I hope you'll buy one and have her sign it. It's really a terrific, thought-provoking read that I'm gonna certainly go back to. Thanks also to Devon and Cody for helping with AV. And before I forget, I just wanted to mention that our next guest on campus will be the wonderful Pacific Northwest writer and lepidopterist, which is someone who studies butterflies, Robert Michael Pyle. He's the author of more than a dozen books and field guides, and he'll be visiting on May 21st, reading and chatting at the EOU library. So look out for posters about that, more details about that soon, and please save the date. It's actually the same day as Spring Symposium, so it's a big day here on campus. I hope you'll have energy for that. Without further ado, let me briefly introduce Georgia and her book. And I'm not sure if I said, but I am Nick Neely, assistant professor of English writing here at EOU, and also the director of the MFA program in creative writing. It's a pleasure to host visiting authors here. Georgia and her book, I'll introduce. Her writing is found in the Yale Review, the New York Times Magazine, the Washington Post, N+1, which is a wonderful critical literary journal out of New York, Defector and Joyland, among other places. She's originally from Oregon, and she now holds an MFA from the University, or she holds an MFA from the University of Idaho, and is currently the Philip Renshaw visiting author in residence at Linfield University across the mountains. As the publisher says about the book, The Striker and the Clock is a beautiful examination of the joy and pain of serious athletics. It's also an eye-opening look at the still developing world of professional women's soccer. Written in 90 short passages reflecting the 90 inexorably passing minutes of a soccer match, the book is a love letter to a maddening sport and a reflection on the way it has shaped a life. In vivid prose, it portrays the athlete as an artist, debating how much of herself to devote to her craft. I'll turn it over to Georgia now, who will read. Thanks so much, Georgia, for making the trip to be with us.
Thank you, Nick, for the introduction, and thank you for inviting me to come read and visit with you guys. Thank you to looks like the soccer team for being hungry and sweaty and coming to listen. I know how that is. And yeah, I was living in Walla Walla for a while, so I'm happy to be back on the east side. I moved to Portland in the fall. It's also a beautiful sunny day, so I appreciate you closer. Tip it down. Yeah. I appreciate you being inside when it's so beautiful outside. Yeah, so as Nick mentioned, this book is about my lifelong relationship with soccer, from childhood to a professional career overseas to some of my adulthood and reckoning with the ending of that relationship or the transformation of it. It even more though to me is about like themes that are ever interesting to me, like gender and endurance and labor and ambition and things like this. So it's fun to go back. This came out a year and a half ago. It's fun to go back now and even think about sort of what still resonates with me as a writer and as a person from this book that I began writing when I was just beginning my career overseas. So and so Nick also mentioned it's broken into 90 small chapters, each chapter sort of a minute of the 90-minute long game. So it's really fun to read from because I get to jump around a little bit. I will do that. I'll read like a little section from one part and then I'll jump to another part to keep things interesting. And I'll just look at you, Nick, for when I should. All right, let's see. I think one of the questions that remains very alive to me, or one of the topics of this book, is the idea of having sort of like two different selves that you're living with, that I was living with, the sporty self and the self that loved to write. I think for a long time, I found these incompatible with each other. I had a really hard time reckoning them. And this book was sort of a way of me trying to figure out how they fit together in myself and in the world. Don't know yet if I've figured that out. Okay, this is from minute 43. At 16, I'd just acquired my driver's license, and with it came the duty of driving myself to and from soccer practice in the suburbs. The 45-minute journey was emblematic of teen freedom. I sped, I talked on the phone, I sang along to my music, listening as loud as I wanted. One particular night after training, I climbed into my dad's station wagon to go home and put on Hoppy Pola by Sigur Rós, the kind of melodramatic song that might play in a movie as a car drives off a cliff. In the next 2 months, I would have to decide whether to go to college primarily to play soccer or to prioritize academics. On the brink of adulthood, I felt for the first time that I had at least two selves, and I anticipated that they might be incompatible. On this particular evening, a conversation with my coach made the emotions of the decision surface. He'd vaguely encouraged me to walk on to the local college team, which he coached. It was one of the top programs in the country, a team I'd admired since I was a young girl. I'd already been accepted to a school I loved with a lower division team that was much less competitive. My coach's encouragement was paralyzing. When the driver in front of me slowed to a stop, I was crying and no longer paying attention. I slammed on my brakes, but the two teammates behind me didn't have as much time to react. No one was hurt, so the jolt from the crash felt like a gift. It offered me a tangible, physical excuse for my tears, for my shaking and confusion. It calmed me down. In the following days, I asked my two favorite high school English teachers what I should do. One of them told me not to waste time, to get to work on your mind. This one liked to call me a jock. I looked up the exact meaning, an enthusiastic athlete or sports fan, especially one with few other interests. The word might have been short for jockey or jockstrap. It might have originally been a nickname for Jack or a word meant to indicate a common man. There was once a feminized version, jockette. I spent the majority of my free time and my most joyful hours playing sports, but still jock felt like a catch-all for a vast group of people. The word didn't begin to attend to all of our disparate motivations, joys, pains, and desires. The other teacher told me to pursue soccer now because you have the rest of your life to read. This contradiction was the heart of my experience. 44. It was January when I arrived in South Korea for my third professional season, and snow plows still needed to clear our training fields. The sub-zero wind bit my naked hands, and on the second morning of practice, a teammate gave me a pair of her gloves. A sullen heaviness accompanied our training, which took place every day of the week, twice. Appa, sick, chua, cold, pegupa, hungry. Those were some of the first Korean words I learned. I was on my first contract in a top league, and I was making a living wage. Alone in my hotel room during preseason, I wondered if I was good enough to be there. I wondered if I was worth the money, and I wondered if I could last the year. Himduro, they taught me, difficult. For most of the season, the team was housed in one wing of a compound on an artificial island in the Yellow Sea. Inside, each bedroom door closed with an electronic padlock, and the hallway smelled of perfumed laundry detergent. At high tide, waves reached the edge of our building, which was secured by a tall gate that locked every night at 10. The rest of the building was made up of halls of empty classrooms, conference rooms, and offices. In the languid evenings, I wandered vacant corridors and opened each door I passed. In one of the rooms, there was a long table covered in a fake wood veneer and surrounded by plump leather office chairs. An artificial fig tree sat in the corner where it got no light, and an always blank TV screen was mounted to one wall. The others were bare. I pushed a desk against the window, unburdened my backpack of its books, pens, and paper, and sat where I could see the dramatic tide recede, leaving dinghies and cargo ships stuck in vast mud flats. I watched as the boat owners disembarked and scoured the ocean bottom for clams. I opened my notebook and drew the diagram of a simple sentence. The waves broke on the shore. I used lines and dashes to depict the grammar structure. A visual representation of the way words relate to each other is a lot like the picture of bodies arranged on a soccer field. On the page across from the sentence, I sketched the corner kick we had learned at practice that day, a small rectangle for the 6-yard box, a larger one for the 18, and a pair of tick marks for the goal mouth. A team of X's moved across the page into open space, a dotted line for a run, a solid line for a pass. They were verbs, adjectives, subjects falling away from each other. I tried to write, but I could feel my left calf twinging with the threat of injury. My head throbbed, my blistered heels pressed into the sharp edge of my tennis shoes. I hadn't drunk enough water that day. We had practice early the next morning, and then a flight to Tokyo where we were scheduled to play 3 games in 5 days. When I was first starting out, I thought a professional soccer career might give me time to write. I thought playing would provide the balance and flexibility that a full-time job could not. But in reality, it was impossible to spend so much time prioritizing my body and at the same time to reside in the private world of my mind. I followed the team to dinner, to practice, to the shower, to the bus. Words were quieted by my body, which demanded incredible amounts of focus and attention. When I was living in Sweden, I tried to write in the mornings at the public library. I sat by a window overlooking the town square, 2 restaurants, a bank, a nightclub. In Lithuania, I took notes in my room, spreading paper and books out on the king-size bed. In Norway, I pulled a desk up to my window, which overlooked a fjord. In Australia, I read a lot and wrote nothing. When I sift through diaries I kept while I was playing, I find a page dated July 7th, Incheon. The only text on the page, "I'm too tired to write. There is nothing in my brain." 45. In empty rooms, libraries, and cafes, I paged through my worn copy of The Waves. I thought of how it related to Virginia Woolf's Percival. I felt an ambiguous affinity with him when I read. I was defensive of his character. I tried to emulate his focus, his singularity. Neville narrates, he will throw off his coat and stand with his legs apart, with his hands ready, watching the wicket, and he will pray, "Lord, let us win." He will think of one thing only. The only thing to consider was how to score a goal. The only thing to do was win. The characterization of Percival reminded me of an essay by David Foster Wallace in which he reviewed the poorly written autobiography of tennis player Tracy Austin. Wallace explains, those who receive and act out the gift of athletic genius must perforce be blind and dumb about it. By dumb, he is referring in part to the complete presence of mind that allows an elite athlete to silence any narrative impulse and perform even in the most difficult of circumstances. In an interview I once watched on YouTube, American soccer player Sarah Woldmoe responded to a question about the skills required for her midfield position by saying, "If you've gotten the ball and you're trying to think, you're too late." Her statement backs up Wallace's theory that would have us believe there is a difference in communicability, even to the self, between thinking and doing, between doing and being. Dumbness, Wallace explains, the inarticulate nature of athletic geniuses, is not the price of their gift, but its essence. In other words, a genius in motion can't also be a genius in reflection. If we agree with Wallace, it follows that an athletic genius will not be able to write a good book. The wonder of their physical ability is in part reliant on wordlessness. It is the same with Percival, who doesn't speak, not even once, in The Waves. What goes through the elite athlete's mind at an important moment in their performance, Wallace suggests, might be nothing at all. I cringe when I listen to vacuous post-game interviews with athletes. At the end of a football game, I turn off the TV before the star speaks to the camera. I'm quick to avoid confirmation of Wallace's stance. I want to believe that the internal life of an athlete can be complicated and verbose. I know my position is tenuous, often contradicted by the behavior of people whose lives revolve around sports. But I also believe that asking an athlete to speak on their performance after its conclusion is like asking a sculptor to play the piano about an exhibition. These are faulty grounds on which to judge either one. I've heard writers describe the sense that they don't know what they're writing until they're done, until the poem is in front of them, until the novel has concluded. They report being overtaken by a creative force, hearing voices. It's a supernatural experience at odds with introspection and self-consciousness. Poetry comes as a gift from powers beyond my will, writes May Sarton in Journal of a Solitude. I'm envious. I long for that, but I don't find it here. As I write this, I take up Neville's position at the top of a grassy hill where he marvels at his friend. I study Percival, love him, romanticize his stoicism. I try to write with physical discipline at my desk, sitting upright, working my way toward completion. That was that little section. What am I doing? I'll read another little one, probably. Another little section I wanted to read was more about sort of like the role that gender plays and played in pain and in endurance. And yeah, I guess that's all I'll say about this. So change of subject. This happens closer to the beginning of the book, minute 26. Fans of soccer often complain about flopping or diving. When they want to draw a foul, players fall over after being lightly nudged or jostled. They roll and writhe after the slightest touch, grabbing their shin and contorting their faces into a silent scream. It's a dramatic performance meant to draw the attention of the referee. Flopping is a practice strategy that frustrates many viewers. Brazil's Neymar Jr., one of the best players in the world, has a reputation for this behavior. I once read that he was taught the art of flailing as a young boy. His father wanted him to be able to protect himself. Neymar had always been one of the smallest players on the field. I was never taught to draw a foul or fall to the ground after contact in the penalty box. Instead, I learned that it drew praise to keep going, to fight, and to endure through bodies and obstacles and tackles. Women never flop. It's not because we're philosophically opposed to the tactic, but because our toughness is our product and resilience helps prove the value of our efforts. There's no hiding that women athletes are, on the whole, slower and less capable of building muscle than our male counterparts. Our power manifests in subtler ways. In the world of sports, women must always remind ourselves and anyone watching that pain will not be the thing that impedes us. I remember the first big hit I took at football practice, a helmet to my cold, bare leg that split my shin open. This, I thought, was part of the test. I stood up quickly and ignored the wound. By the end of practice, my sock was wet with a deep red stain. 28, I'm skipping one because I don't like it anymore. For as long as I can remember, I've associated pain with effort, equated physical expenditure with accomplishment. I still imagine that the sensation of bruising flesh is inseparable from the feeling of being fully alive. I think of my mom, 3 childbirths with no epidural. I assume she wanted to be present for it, to live through it in all of its misery, to embrace this fact of womanhood. Maybe she thought it would prove something. My mother has never spoken much about her own pain from childbirth or otherwise. For the most part, she is stoic and reserved. She was part of a generation of women who lived through a fledgling feminism and didn't grow up accustomed to its rewards. She played sports before Title IX protected female participants. She endured various injustices, and in the end, she succeeded in remarkable ways. She was the first female partner at her law firm, a state champion 200-meter sprinter. I wonder if she felt her pain was a right, as I had so many times throughout my athletic career. In the space around my mother's suffering is a stillness, a silence. Years after I quit soccer, I become pregnant, and I'm determined to move through my labor without medication, for no other reason than to discover what is on the other side of great pain. I will think of pregnancy and childbirth as an athletic event. To endure is to suffer patiently, and I've been made to believe that the greatest reward awaits us after a struggle. I think that was all, from that. Funny, here I am pregnant again. You'll have to read the sequel to find out how that goes. Should I keep going, or I feel like that's good. It's more fun to talk. Thank you.
Hello. Thanks, Georgia. That was really great and nice to hear from different sections of the book. And maybe as a way to start, that if as we now know, a defining feature of this book is it's written in these short sections, 90 of them. It's such an intuitive and interesting choice, very surprising in its way, but it makes so much sense. And it allows you to leap all over, to do different things. I'm wondering if you could just say more about how you hit on this very important structuring idea. Was it something that came to you right away? I want to write a book on soccer. What's the best way to arrange it? Let's do this. Or was it something that you struggled with and gradually came to you as you wrote snippets and wondered how to arrange them? And then the part two of this question is, what did that structuring allow for you in the writing? How did it change the book ultimately?
Great question. One I really wish I knew the answer to, because I'm always struggling with structure in writing. I have, this book started as little notes that I took over 7 years, all through when I was playing. And I brought those notes with me to grad school, and I thought, I'm not going to write about soccer because I had identity problems still. I want to be a real writer. And I just kept them in this really huge document. And I knew as I was organizing it and thinking about it that the sort of chronology was not important to me at all. The way a celebrity's memoir reads, I grew up and this is the secret. And then I had these struggles and then I succeeded and now I'm, famous. And that's why you bought the book. No one was going to read my book for that reason. So I was more interested in these collections of themes that were appearing in my head, but how to sort of communicate how these things were connected when I'm jumping from, my, youth football practice to professional in Korea. I wanted that to feel cohesive, and I had no structure until the very, very end. I was writing this as a graduate thesis, and an advisor said something to me, and I don't remember what it was, and I just tried it. And it all sort of clicked, and it made all the difference in the world for the whole life of the book. And it also allowed me to feel it's so much I didn't read from a section that really implied this, but so much of this is about how to let go of something you love and how to know when you're done, because that's not always very clear, especially in sports, but I think with a lot of things we love to do. And so I wanted there to be this sort of foreboding sense of time throughout. And yes, I'm saying I don't want to start from the beginning and come to an end, but I also have to end this, and so that's that, how to write a book without an ending, because it has to end, so I wanted that sense of time ticking, and the containment of a game and a season and a life all feels really related to me. So it just really worked out.
Yeah, it did really work out. I think it's a brilliant choice. One of the things that Georgia does along the way is that at quarter, halftime, 3 quarters through the game, there's one of the sections discusses what that part of the game feels like, which is really interesting. So that it creates a kind of narrative arc of a match. And then I would argue that we do get a sense of your trajectory in your professional career across the book. So though it's not a narrative book, that is there. Were you thinking about the way in which something that really is leaping around, we could call it like kind of more in the mode of what some call lyric essay, right? Or it sort of draws on the techniques of poetry, making these interesting connections. Were you still thinking about how you could spread stuff out so that it would pull the reader through?
Yeah, definitely those minute markers, like to make them feel more relevant than just sort of very abstractly relevant. I wanted to touch on like the actual game experience, and I thought the more of that writing would benefit it. But I also think, yes, there's like a sense of beginning at the beginning of the book, and there's definitely a sense of ending. And it was fun because I feel like to me, the sense of beginning was all the time. A new season, a new coach, a new house. And there's a section I write about how repetitive that felt every year. Like I'm beginning again and I just want to play one more year. And then similarly, every season I was like, is that my last one? I don't know, maybe, is that my last one? And so the questions were occurring all the time. And then in the book, they sort of collect to create like a real sense of ending and a real sense of beginning, but I still get to move around in time.
Yeah, and at this, the other clock that's ticking, right, is the sort of athlete's body, right? And we see you sort of wearing out in a way, right? Even though you're so young in this book, to my mind, at 26, but you mentioned, right, 26, sort of the pinnacle of the soccer player's career. Anyway, thinking about this book, what struck me after finishing it is that you don't really write about like soccer technique or say game strategy or recount particular plays from your career, like the greatest hits. And you, in fact, mentioned that it was difficult for you to extract sort of like individual scenes, right? And this way, the book isn't like a how-to play soccer. Instead, it's really about the sensation of the game and the uncertainties and your travel experiences. You theorize about games a lot also, and we should talk about that. But wondering if you could say more about your choice to make it different in this way and not talk about like the fundamentals. Was that something that like just didn't interest you? Was it a choice that you made in response to other sports writing that you read, or say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think both. I think I was really longing for a book that would speak to my experience that was like more nuanced and more sort of in my head. And again, I was more interested as I sat down to write, not about like the game of soccer, which is analyzed beautifully in many places, but about like the deep questions of sports and why we engage with them, and why it's hard to let them go, and what role they play in our lives as children, and what structure they give our lives as adults if we manage to turn that into our job for a little while. Yeah, that's all I could think of. What was the second part of your question?
I don't know if there was a second part, but that's excellent. Yeah, I mean, I found myself thinking, and this gets us into the idea of games, that you had created a kind of structure, the 90 sections, like a kind of guideline or constraint, Rich, that allowed creativity in the way that rules of a game do. Was that something that you were thinking of, how the book as a kind of game?
That's very beautiful. I just taught a class on constraint, and I love constraint in writing, which is famously a poetic technique that is borrowed by nonfiction a lot.
Yeah.
So I think it did sort of enable me to be free in my writing. I don't know if I've ever connected that, but I do write in the book about like the constraint of the field and the constraint of rules and how these things enable us to be free, and also the sort of like immediate feedback you get from playing games.
Mm-hmm.
Like you scored this many goals, you played this many minutes, and how hard it is to find that in any other area in your life, especially in writing, which is sort of like an infinite and ambiguous and very lonely project. So I really longed for that, and I missed that.
Let's talk more about sort of the synergies and tensions between athletics and artistry. The book is really about that. And the section you read to us, I sort of like leaned into the tension, right? Or maybe we feel that there's a division between creativity and the discipline of sports. But the book's also about like working through that. And I think it shows ultimately like that these distinctions break down, right? That this book is a work of sports artistry. But you write on page 11, I have always inhabited these two worlds, art and sport, and most specifically writing and soccer. And I have also lacked the language, confidence, or understanding to know how they inform each other and overlap. When did you sort of realize that was the project and kind of fusing these worlds? And what other kind of insights could you tell us about the way in which these things are in tension versus aligned or drawing from the same place?
Yeah, I mean, I think the ways they're in tension have everything to do with stereotypes that I felt always stereotyped as an athlete. Jocks don't care about art or school, and artists don't know anything about sports. I mean, I have so many friends that are like, me, I don't even know the rules. And I'm like, okay, is that some sort of brag? But I think it took me a long time to feel comfortable. I'm like around these teammates who sort of don't share my interests. And then I'm at school in class with writers who don't share my interests. And I had to, even in grad school, I was playing on like the club men's soccer team. And, I would like leave my workshop and go to this other world and have this whole different group of friends. And I think I started to really enjoy that escape then. But I still struggle with it. And I think it's just like getting older and becoming more mature to like have confidence to just be myself. And I'm like, I do write books and I really love sports, watching, playing, everything about them. And to me, in me, that's not a contradiction. And even beyond that, I mean, like the actual practice of writing and the practice of being an athlete, to me now, I can see that I wouldn't be a writer, at least not in the way I am now, without my background in sports. The sort of like single-minded obsession and determination and like believing in yourself when no one else does. And the ego part of it, that's definitely like sports requires some ego and making art requires some ego. And these are things I really struggle with and wrestle with. And like overcoming rejection is a huge thing, overcoming failure in sports, like all these, like the real like lessons and things that make up my personality. Now I see those as completely relevant to both parts of my life. But I think more of the division was like social and like, and, I read about like the mind body divide. It's like when I'm in my sport, I'm not thinking about anything else. When I'm writing, it's sort of super removed from my body. And I think I've just come to really enjoy that. I'm like, let me get out there on my co-ed soccer field and forget about my life for a while. It's great.
It's called balance, right?
Yeah.
There's this great anecdote where, I guess an early a teacher, I'm sorry. You had won a soccer game and she handed a paper back to you and said, a girl who can write like this ought not to worry about goal kicks. I guess you had missed the goal kick and you recount in the book, one of the sections is the goal kicks you missed, which are memorable. Excuse me. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry if I misspoke. Yes, that's important. And then later, which is brilliant, you say she thought more about this and she said later, the reason you can write like that is because you worry about goal kicks, right? So that these things are deeply connected, whether, personality or training. Let's talk about sort of the game theory you bring into it, which I thought was fascinating. Is that something that you had thought about, like what games are and what they do for us and how we inhabit them as you started out in this project? Or did you sort of begin to learn about games in a more purposeful way in the writing of it? I'll just to share like one bit that I relished, that you write about the distinction between achievement play and striving play. quote unquote, in achievement play, the purpose is to win. The end matters more than the means. In striving play, an individual can enjoy the game for the rewards that come from the struggle of overcoming specific obstacles. There are all kinds of insights and like little bits of useful concepts, right? And that bubble up in the book along those lines that are wonderful. And just could you say more about coming to those and what you learned about games?
Yeah, it was so helpful to borrow language like that. I think it was my editor that suggested that book, Games Are as Agency. It's a great book. So I read it later in this project, but I think it sort of mapped onto my experience as I got older and toward the older, you're right, it doesn't seem very old, 27 years old or something, toward what I felt like was the end of my playing career. And I was, playing with a really, really good team in Seattle and just started enjoying practice more than I ever had. Like just wanted to be there, wanted all the drills set up for me, wanted to be playing with the best players in the world and was so content. And that contentment was like unfamiliar to me. And I was like, there we go, is the striving play versus achievement. I was like really slipping into like a different understanding of what joy could mean in soccer and what and that idea of contentment. I write about the arrival fallacy. That's not necessarily game theory, but it's another phrase that helped me understand that sort of like striving, like how do we let go when we've been trained our whole life to strive for something more? Arrival fallacy being like, you think you are gonna, if you score so many goals, if you make it onto this team, if you succeed in some way you've set out to succeed, that you will be content and then happy and then stop striving. And that's never true, almost never true, at least for certain kinds of minds, that you reach that milestone and then you immediately make another one. I mean, it's a recipe for success and also torture because at some point it has to end.
True in book writing too, right? As you were unable to bring yourself to read a certain chapter. We learn a fair amount about the landscape of women's professional soccer, during your tenure. You roam between leagues and we learn how little most women players are given in return for their all-consuming commitments to the game. There's a great line that I underlined vigorously. Passion can act as a veil, covering up the fact that all sport is rooted in a sexist and exploitative history. Your own intensity, like being willing to play for nothing almost, right? One of the sections which I loved was you just list what you were paid, right, across 5 leagues, which was as little as $500 a month, right, with room and board and travel included in Sweden, and as much as $37,000 in Korea, right, which is where the section you read from, and the reader's sort of aghast at that and the disparity, right, with men's soccer. Maybe if you could talk a little bit more about that, and then I just love to hear, what you might say about the state of women's soccer today, at the professional level, and have things changed for the better.
Yeah. I was just thinking like this book is wonderfully outdated every day. I think the, women's soccer transfer record is broken. Every time there's a transfer, it's broken. It's like the best thing. It's a growing sport. The WNBA just signed a CBA. Their average salary is going to be $400,000 a year, which sounds really high. But in reality, again, it's like, oh, we should be so thankful for so much progress, but that's about like, the average salary in the NBA is $10 million. So how ridiculous. Anyways, but yes, so much more sustainable, so wonderful, growing all the time, hugely changed. Although I think this experience could definitely still be found in some overseas markets, and even maybe still here at home. But you bring up, like, I think it was so interesting to me to think about, like, it's a very cultural thing to want to work your, dream job. That I'm like, it's a very American ideal to have a dream job, and to find your passion and your meaning in your work. And I think, soccer was always something that was just like so fun to me and something I loved so much that I did it for essentially free for as long as I wanted and could. And I encountered, that was not true for everyone I played with, especially in Korea, where it was a sustainable job, like much more sustainable than a lot of other jobs for the girls there. It was like depressing and a lot of them didn't want to be there. And it was like really hard. And I was sort of like, whoa, what? Like, this isn't just fun for us all. And that's true. Like, my husband has a friend on the Portland Timbers, and their goalie like hates soccer. He's never liked it, but he's just like really good at it and gets paid. And I think when I was doing publicity for this book, the editor was like, what advice would you give, or the publicist, what advice would you give to people who want to turn their passions into, to monetize their passions? And I'm like, well, it's so strange that this is now. Yeah. And it's so relevant to writing too, which is like something you do because you love it. And that is so important. But at the same time, you do such a disservice to to women in sport by not advocating for more or like demanding more, just saying you're like happy to be here. So I think I just like to reckon with that conflict and like how important is joy, how important is money, can these things go together, and in what sort of balance?
Yeah, no, the book is a fascinating exploration of that across the book. I've got more questions, but I would love to field yours, and I'll sprinkle in mine if necessary. And what questions do you have for Georgia? I'll bring the mic around. Yeah, Nancy.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. I played soccer long ago and I love the game. So I'm looking forward to reading your story. I like your concept of striving play. I'm thinking particularly about the way the education system in America has kind of taken the fun out of writing. Like, writing is a form of self-expression. It's very much tied to people's voice and hearts. And yet we use it here to assess student learning and often make students feel really ashamed of their voice, which is frustrating. Can you give students any advice for seeing writing as a kind of striving play also?
Wow, what a wonderful parallel that I might not have made. I think about my thinking as it relates to writing would be like striving is enjoying the practice of writing and the play of writing, and achievement is like publishing in my life now, and the way those things are in conflict. But yeah, I mean, I think I teach creative writing now for the first time, and it's really hard to do it in a school setting where you're getting graded. It's very confusing to me when the point is to sort of play and listen, and it takes a lot of time, and it's not always very like controllable. You can't just like write a short story whenever you want to, but at the same time, like, it's something to be taken quite seriously, and it's like can benefit hugely from repetition and showing up even when you don't have anything, and completing things even when you don't feel like you can, and sharing them when you don't feel like you want to. So I think like an amount of like discipline is really important, but I don't know. I haven't been in a world where, other than like grading, which I do very kindly as my solution, other than grading, I haven't had to like assess based like on grammar and things like that, which I think can definitely, the like sort of stress or like constraint of that could really hamper creative expression. But I think creative writing, keeping it separate from like analytical writing, is also important and cool.
More questions?
Other than sort of writing out like your thoughts, how would you deal with the stress and pressure like before a game? if it was really weighing on your mind.
Stress and pressure of playing. I feel like that sort of went away. I mean, I danced, I listened to music, and I write a lot about everyone's different pregame rituals. I wasn't very much a stickler about like superstition and things like that, but I observed a lot of that. I feel like, you know, at certain points in my career, there was definitely more pressure than not, but I had the privilege again of like being someone who was just playing for fun. And like, yes, I wanted to be on the national team. Like, of course, I was also extremely competitive and driven, but like, I was so glad to just be able to keep playing and to keep pushing myself and to keep putting myself into challenging positions that I feel like pressure, you know, there are moments of pressure in a game. Penalty kick, for example, I hated taking them. Shouldn't exist, whatever. But I think before a game, I would just have like kind of buoyant nerves, and that was a positive thing. But I was really lucky. Yeah.
You talk about nerves as a good thing in the book, and I was like, whew, that's good to hear. More questions? Maybe oh, yes.
How did you come to terms with being done with soccer? Or like, when did you know you're done?
I still haven't. I'm still waiting on another phone call. No, I do write about getting a phone call from my agent. Like I'm enrolled in grad school, like working some shitty summer job in between semesters. And he called, he's like, are you still playing? I'm like, yeah, sure. I could still get on a plane, you know, really reluctant to sort of like formally be like, I'm retiring. But I think the timing was just like I applied to grad school and I was still in Seattle training with the team over the summer, like wanting to get a contract. And I got into grad school like for a fully funded spot, and that was rare too. And I just had sort of worn out the desire, the like willingness to sort of move all over the place. And I had a torn meniscus that I didn't know about, and my body was sort of giving me signals. But I think it took a while after that. I mean, I never had like regret, like I should have kept playing longer. I could have gotten so far. I just missed it, right? Like I just missed traveling with the team. I missed getting ready. I missed wearing jersey. I missed all the things that you get to do. I missed practice. And I found ways to like stay around it a little bit and play with boys and like, you know, on the club team and still be like able to get to the space where I didn't have to think about anything, which was really the gift. But I still now I moved to Portland and I got on like a rad co-ed, you know, group of like other ex-pros and college players, and it's really fun. So I'm like lucky. Not all of my teammates still want to do that, and some, you know, one who played for the Thorns and had to retire from a concussion is like, she was like in tears after a co-ed game because it's not like settled for her enough, and I can so easily empathize and understand with that. When we get to choose to step away, when we don't, there's no real, like, you don't know what ending will be yours. Like maybe it will be the end of college, maybe it won't, maybe it'll be an injury, maybe it won't. And yeah, I feel like in that regard, I got kind of lucky, but I also just keep in touch with it and miss it a lot all the time because it's best.
You talk about how your life is basically threaded through soccer. There's a beautiful passage where you're coming back from Europe. I think maybe after your last time, right, in a professional league, and you're looking down and seeing all the soccer fields, and just thinking about all the memories they hold for you. It's a really, really lovely passage that encapsulates the book.
Yeah, there's like a very like it's very sensual, the memories of soccer, like mud smell and like certain, like, I don't know, the rubber turf ball. There's like so much
rotting cleats.
Yeah. Yum. Smell of like a fresh rubber ball.
Words, not mine.
So that's nice. It can recall itself to you in these ways. Yeah.
More questions? Let's see what time we have. We've got another 5 minutes if there are more.
You talked a little bit about contentment when I think you were playing up in Seattle with like great players. How did you find that? Like, I find myself going to practice and I'm watching the clock the whole time. I'm waiting to get out of there. I sit down in class and I'm watching the clock again, waiting to get out of there. And I'm just like never content where I am. Like, how do you achieve that? How are you happy with where you are, like right when you're there? Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think it's overselling it to say that I was content because I like really wanted a contract. I really wanted to play in a game. You know, I was still very much striving, but I think I just found a lot of joy and I leaned into that joy. So I feel like you have to decide where you want to be. And then you can have both, right? You can enjoy the moment, you can feel the joy and really appreciate that while also, you know, wanting more. And I think that's really like the hardest balance to have as like a professional in any field at all. But I think just giving yourself permission to like have fun is really important and to not take everything so seriously. Like either way, you're going to have to be there and do the practice if you want to, you know, move on to the next level. If you want to do anything else also, that's okay. But like you still have what's in front of you. And it's sort of like a privilege and a joy to be there. So holding both is the real challenge, I think. Yeah.
Good question and good answer. A couple more questions. George? Yeah.
Hi, and I think it was minute 3 where you talked about how you were looking at like yourself through like video camera from I think your state game. How was it like questioning yourself? Because I know you talked about it a little bit, but like more in depth of seeing yourself, knowing it was you, but you didn't know that person, like your own self, if that makes sense.
Yeah, right. Wow, good memory. You really read it. It's talking about like video of a high school state championship game that I had on video, and I found that I was thankful I took notes as I was playing overseas because like thinking back on who I was as a player in high school or like club soccer, I mean, I think I was so much more timid. I really grew into myself like later in college and beyond, getting so much better and more confident. And so like thinking back on this sort of like timid player that like didn't score so many goals and like played a role, but like didn't play the central role, it was very strange to me. And I think, I don't know, like it's nice to know that you can sort of like grow and change like much later in your career, which is great. And I think it's funny you say that because there's another moment of like watching back, which is just watching back video with my team in Korea after I had scored goals and not remembered what they were, right? And so even on the smaller level, there is like a forgetfulness. And then also writing about like how that's part of the job of a soccer player is to forget when things go bad. So, but it made it really hard to write, I will say. Like we're supposed to sort of erase our memories and move on when we miss a goal. And also we're flooded with adrenaline when we score, so we can't really remember. And then also the player we are and the person we are changes so much based on where we are and how old we are and what position we're playing and all of that. So it was a real challenge for the book, I think, but sort of like a cool concept, an enjoyable concept. Yeah, good question.
Maybe one more question. I know you got them.
Did you ever have like a pregame snack, meal, or song that was like a must before a game?
Oh, that's a great one to end on. Although I have such a bad, I don't really have one. I was like a coffee gal in the end, had an iced Americano, like would walk by myself to go get a coffee, had to like a lot of coffee. Snack, not so much. Like I had some really embarrassing playlists. I can't remember what was at the Lil Yachty, like Beyonce. I don't know, just like embarrassing stuff. I think my publisher also was like, "Can you put together a playlist of like pump up songs?" I was like, "This is true humiliation throughout the years." Like go way back.
You definitely didn't mention Yanni in the book. That was good. Thanks for that question. Can I ask one more question? This for those of us who want to get into writing about sports. Maybe we played, maybe we love to watch. What kind of advice do you have? You write about. You say each time I go to write about the joy of playing, I must be making it up, like the difficulty of capturing the essence of sports, and yet you do it so well across the book in different ways. Well, what can what advice do you have for sports writing and getting into it and making it literary as you do?
Oof, tough one. I mean, I'm just thinking of all the books I love that are about sports, which isn't very many. Leanne Shapton's Swimming Studies, Catherine Scanlon's Kick the Latch, which is like just interviews with a horse trainer from Iowa, amazing book. And I think what I'm thinking of from those books is like the specificity of scenes. It's something I really lean away from as a person and a writer because I like to live up high in my head. But it's so important to writing about sports, especially personal experience in sports, like what happened, what was the smell, what was the sound, like what did the locker room look like, who was in there, so like details, which I was so glad I took notes while I was living in it because I wouldn't have remembered that kind of stuff. So even if you're just writing as an observer, I think the same sort of level of detail can really help because the middle ground is like less interesting, I think.
Thank you. Did you know there was a book in this experience from early on as you were taking notes, or was that in the back of your mind?
I mean, I wrote it and I sent it to N+1. It was the first essay I ever published, and I had a wonderful experience with them. And I was like, cool. And I sent it to an old professor, and he was like, "Let me know when you want to turn this into a book." And I was like, huh? What? Okay, well, I didn't think about it for another 6 years, but I just kept taking notes and it sort of grew. And again, it felt like, oh, this book, I still haven't quite found the book that I want to read to help me through this, relationship. So I think that's why it came to be in the end.
Thanks for indulging me with one more question.
Yeah, great questions.
Couldn't
all
resist.
around. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. And Georgia, that was a pleasure. Thanks so much for being here. I'm sure Georgia will answer any questions you might have in person. And then there are books for sale if you want to grab one. It's really a terrific read.